Welcome to the Four Seasons Podcast, brought to you by B&H Wealth Strategies, serving Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia since 1966. Here, we guide you through the ever-changing seasons of your financial journey, offering insights to help you grow, protect, and enjoy your wealth. Ready to turn your financial dreams into reality? Dare to dream. And now, here's your host, President of B&H Wealth Strategies, Jeff Bingham.
New legislation always stirs up concern and curiosity. In this episode, we unpack how the big, beautiful bill affects two of your most important financial pillars, your tax obligations and your Social Security benefits. Welcome back, everybody. Skip Monty here, co-host / producer back in the studio with President of B&H Wealth Strategies, Jeff Bingham. Jeff, how you been this week?
I am great, Skip. How are you doing on this Friday morning?
I'm doing just fine and thankful it's Friday. So I am good to go. Now, Jeff, one of those topics that has people watching the headlines and has for some time now, it's a perfect time to dive into how this bill, the big, beautiful bill, shapes some key financial decisions. So from your perspective, what impact does the big, beautiful bill have on income tax and Social Security?
Well, thanks for throwing me a softball here this morning on a Friday morning, too, just to kind of wade into. And I think a couple of things to look at there is, there's a ton of things that are in it, and we'll focus on these two things right here. From an income tax perspective, from an individual income tax perspective, really nothing changed, right? This was the bill put into play the permanency of what the Trump tax deal did in 2016, which were set to sunset next year if they hadn't been voted on. So it keeps the tax rates where they were from an individual perspective. So what's important about that, I would say, would be that what folks are not going to see as they move into next year, had those sunsetted, is they're not going to see a tax increase. So that you're going to stay at about the same place. So you're not going to see a big tax reduction. But what you would have seen, I think, and I haven't run the numbers and I've listened to a lot of things out there, but just running the numbers from the 2016, when we started calculating those out from an average income perspective, and we can talk about what that actually means. But for middle-class Americans, it was about a $2,000, something like that, $2,100 of tax savings that the 2016 original tax bill eliminated, if you will, or reduced. And so what you would have seen is obviously that increase would have occurred. And there's some inflation adjustment and things that are in there from that perspective. But so I think that's important. I think it would have been, and we talk about all things markets and investments and things when we're talking here, certainly. So staying focused on that part of it. Had the bill not gone through and this tax bill had not, we can talk about a lot of things around it, but had it not been voted and gotten done and put into place, the markets would have reacted they would have been unhappy. We felt the tariff shakeout between that week from April 2nd to April 9th when the initial tariff thing, we saw a lot of market volatility to the downside. We quite likely would have seen something like, who knows? It wouldn't have been looked upon favorably. The market would have reacted in a negative way. So that being said, you haven't really seen the market just take off since that because it was already baked into the cake, if you will, right? The tax bill getting passed, it just seemed like it was going to happen. The big beautiful bill was going to happen. That's from an income tax perspective. And let me stop there before I move to Social Security. Is there anything, again, as I spit that out right there, anything that you want to ask along those lines, or you think our listeners would want me to touch on that I didn't right there?
Well, I think it's interesting. You said this, but depending on what side of the aisle you're on, one side said this will be the biggest tax increase, which technically it would have been because it would have expired from 2016. But then you got the other side of the aisle saying it's the biggest tax cut, which it's really not a cut. It's a preventative of an increase.
That's correct. It's language and framing and how that's done. A lot of things, but it would have been a big tax increase. Certainly, we just talked about right there as the rates would have changed and the various things, and so it would have been a shock. to average Americans, let's say, income earners. And I think that's the thing. And like I said, the markets would have reacted negatively. So not only might you have seen your pocketbook have a little less in it each month off that paycheck that you get, but also for a period of time anyway. And these things end up kind of, evening themselves out. But your 401k statement would probably might have suffered a little bit too, at least in the short run. These things we tend to kind of navigate these things. And when the rules change and tax rates change and all this kind of thing, markets and investments, and everybody kind of learns how to navigate those things. I think that for me, I guess I'm more of a supply sider. I think the more people that can keep their money versus sending their money to Washington, I think that's a better idea. I think people and businesses are better at utilizing their money than Washington is. So I'm certainly a conservative capitalist, if you will. So I was in favor of the tax part of the bill. There's some parts of the bill that you can certainly talk about. There's still an awful lot of spending and things that are in there and we won't go into. But like I said, it was not a tax decrease. It just extended and put into permanent law until, again, somebody comes along later and rewrites
Changes. Right.
bill, or in some shape, form, or fashion. It's not going to stay. It's not permanent. Nothing's permanent in Washington or in life at all. But it is for now, and I think Ned, it's good. I think that a positive reinforcement for the markets and the folks that are listening, their investments that are out there. I think that's a positive.
Amen, brother. I'm with you. I'm a free market guy and a capitalist too, so I'll take it all day long. So yeah, I agree. Well, what about Social Security?
Well, I think that's the interesting part of that, where from Social Security, the taxation on Social Security, and we've talked about that. I think in an episode not too awful long ago, and one of the things I was talking about is that depending on when you start drawing Social Security, your other income sources that you have, we had as much as 85% of your Social Security could be subject to income tax, right? So for some people, that number, and these are clients of mine, I can go through a client list of mine and identify this. Some folks don't pay any tax on their Social Security, and then but it starts graduating up, but none of your Social Security, or never has any or all of your Social Security, I had a hard time saying that, all of your Social Security been subject to income tax, but up to 85% on it, depending on your income. Married couples and joint couples, a little bit different numbers that are there. But this bill, through a mathematical adjustment and deductions and an extra credit that's in there, basically eliminates taxation on all Social Security benefits, regardless of your income level in retirement that are out there. So, but that is only good. That is from this year through 2028. So it also is not a permanent thing. And I haven't gone all the way through the bill. This is sorting this out through some summaries of it that we've been, kind of studying on a little bit. Artificial intelligence is an amazing thing that can help you.
Yes,
it can help summarize some of these things, and then Jake and Matt and folks like that will read them to me. But I think it is a significant thing for many of my clients. So I'll give you some anecdotal little story on that. I was working with a client of mine as we were sorting out, and the bill was just getting ready to get passed into legislation, but we were working on her retirement income strategy. And so she's getting ready to cut on Social Security. She's going to be 65 years old. So in the fall, so she's going to cut her Social Security on, and then she's got a pension. And we were looking at all these things, and so we were doing her income tax calculation to determine, okay, how much of the Social Security is going to be subject to income tax. And in her case, it was 85% of it, right? So 85% of her Social Security benefit, she's around $30,000 worth of Social Security benefit. That means $25,500 was going to be subject to tax. She got a pension of about $45,000. So we were looking at withholding and what she currently had withheld to try to figure it out. And so, I went through all the mathematical, gymnastics of figuring that out and coming up with the numbers. And then she and I talked on the phone, and this is how much you need to adjust your withholding, and this is how much we need to withhold from Social Security, et cetera. And then, boom, then you go through and you read the bill, and all that changed. Right. So her withholding, her tax liability went from somewhere up in the, to let's say it was roughly $8,000 or something like that, is what it looked like from a taxation standpoint, and hadn't done the final calcs on it, but it probably nearly cut her tax liability in half as a result of that. And that's
Wow.
significant. That's a lot more spendable money in your pocket.
Absolutely. Major positive. Major
Yeah, I mean
positive.
that's not quite, but it's about 300 and nearly 300, about $333 a month more in her pocket if you think about it on a monthly basis of spendable income. So yeah, it's
Wow.
pretty significant.
And some other key notes in the big beautiful bill are no tax on tips. Well, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, up to I think the first up to $25,000. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's, and I don't have as much knowledge in this, but I think it's very curious and interesting to me, because I do come from I come from a restaurant background. I don't know if we've talked about that maybe a little bit on the air. So I come from from 18 to almost 30 years old when I started here. I was a bartender, I was a waiter, I was in restaurant management at the same time. So I'm very sensitive to that. And there's a lot of ways to look at that. I think if I were a server, most of the time these are kids that are, especially at the $25,000 and below level of not being taxed. A lot of people, and I say kids, college kids, high school, college kids, waiting on tables, paying their way through school and doing those kind of things. I think that's, I like, I think it's a decent idea. I haven't seen the revenue numbers. I don't know exactly what that looks like from across the board. What did it take out of the coffers and that kind of thing? But when you look at, so first 25,000, that's, again, depending on what you're doing, how much you work, that's not a tremendous amount in today's world. That's not a tremendous amount of money, from an earnings perspective. But it certainly will keep more money in their pocket. And again, in servers, again, this is the way I look at it. I don't know if anybody else has thought about it. This is just my own kind of take on it, is that servers, waiters, and bartenders, not many people use cash anymore, right? So everybody uses credit cards. So, you're getting taxed on your tip and everything all the time now because it goes through credit card. Back in the days, not too awful long ago, and certainly when I was doing it, people were paying in cash. And you
Right.
had to report, it was a requirement of your employer to report some of your tip money from an income tax perspective, but most of it you put in your pocket, or a good amount of it. So it was not subject to tax. Anyway, don't have the IRS come and get me for that. But everybody knows that, right? And so
Right.
with the advent, today's server, I guess prices are higher and all those kind of things. Today's server hadn't had that opportunity, right? Because there's very little cash transactions in anything, and that includes restaurants and bars. I don't know, just because of my background, and I think I kind of like it.
I do too. My daughter used to work at Buffalo Wild Wings, and she made like $2 an hour, or $2.25 or
Yeah, it used to
something
be
per hour.
201. Used to be, yeah, but that's
201. That's right.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
201.
And she made the majority of her money off of tips. So I
Yep.
could imagine, and she was a college student. So I totally get it. I think it's a good thing, and it sounds to me like overall that the big beautiful bill is a good thing. From my perspective.
Yeah, I think a lot of those things are good. Where the again, depending on, there's multiple things you can look at. I think there's still a lot of spending that's in it. There weren't a lot of spending cuts, and there's a lot of consternation about that. The deficit hawks, even on both sides of the aisle, certainly on the Republican side, the more kind of. I'll just call them the deficit hawks. The deficit hawks certainly didn't like it, so there was a lot of hand holding. What we call the whips have to go, and there was a lot of negotiation that took place. And when you got to build this, there's just going to be so much negotiation. Legislation is watching how the sausage is made and having to listen to it on a regular basis. It's pretty ugly. And to get people to vote, certainly in congressional districts and things like that, there's a lot of give and take that takes place in there, and it's kind of ugly, and it irritates people. You can see what it did, and this is probably likely to happen anyway. But look at the relationship between an Elon Musk, and the Doge thing and Donald Trump. That's probably a friendship or a marriage, if you will, in some sense. It was doomed for failure anyway. Without going into
Right.
that, but that was certain. Musk is like, this, too much money being spent, and he's not wrong, because we are $37 trillion in debt as a country, right? So that it's a lot. And then we're, plus or minus, we're looking at, nearly $2 trillion deficit. We talk about what the bill forecast and all those kind of things. That's a different conversation, but give or take about $2 trillion spending more than we're taking in. We put a debt ceiling. We raised the debt ceiling up to over $5 trillion. So basically what that amounts to is you can pretty much guarantee within somewhere between the next 18 and 24 months that the deficit's going to be 41 to $42 trillion. That's basically what they do with raising the debt ceiling. That's where we're heading. Yep. And that's, and at some point in time, that is, and I'm not going to beat on this drum too much, but that's, you're mortgaging your future. And it's not my future here at 65 years old where I am, but it's Matt's over here to my right. It's Matt. It's my son, Jake. I mean, that's, at some point in time, nobody's interested in spending. Everybody's interested in spending cuts until you talk about what you're going to cut. But not on what I'm receiving in benefits or getting out of it and that kind of thing. So, how do we remedy that? I don't know. Like I said, usually those things will get remedied when there's a train wreck.
Yep.
and that's a train wreck out there. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that's a train wreck that's going to happen out there at some point in time.
Couldn't agree more. And like you said, this is a whole nother. We could talk about the deficit for a whole nother couple of episodes.
It's a different thing, but we're 1.2. We can talk about interest rates and all those kind of things. The cost of the debt, right? The cost of the debt is $1.2 trillion, and that number is not, even if the deficit stayed or the debt stayed where it is, not the deficit, the debt stayed where it was. We didn't even increase it. We've got, it won't be exactly right in this, but roughly a third of the debt comes due over the next 9 months or so, maybe a little bit less than that now. And then close to 50% over the next 18 to 24 months. So a lot of, and again, we're not paying that debt down, right? Then we're just going to refinance it. And so as interest rates, which they have moved, we finance on a very short-term basis over the period between 20 and 2024. I mean, for obvious reasons, because it's really cheap. But now you're going to, as interest rates have moved up since the point in time when much of that debt was financed, it's going to roll over at a higher interest rate. And so that debt is projected to move up into the 1.5 trillion, excuse me. That's hard to, the numbers, just a billion, a trillion, whatever. No. And so that debt is the first thing that's the first line item that's going to be taken care of on the, from the government, right? That's the first money. We're going to pay the debt or we're going to pay the interest on the debt. That's the first thing. And when that number is 1.5, and that's, when we've got a $5 trillion, I think it's roughly $5 trillion in revenue that we take in, you can do the arithmetic on that. It's 25. It's too much of the tax receipts, right? It's too much of the revenue stream that we bring in. And then you leave less money for everything else. So it truly is, and this truly stunts growth. It's mortgage in the future. I don't want to go off on the debt, but I don't believe you can grow a little of your way out of it. But I think those that adhere to something known as modern monetary theory, it's an academic theory that's out there that I think is completely preposterous. I think this thing we'll have a reset at some point in time on this debt. I don't know when, but
No, I have a feeling we'll be talking about this again in the future. But
net, the bill, with the things that we talked about, certainly from those that are at retirement or nearing retirement, and certainly those that are in, and I say that because of the Social Security break on taxation on that is a net positive, certainly across the board for my clients. Again, I haven't read all the way through. I've seen the numbers that are projected, but I haven't seen it on a line item basis of what kind of revenue, what kind of loss of revenue is that from the tax coffers that are out there. But you can see the numbers, but it's that are out there in total with the CBO scoring and things like that. But I don't know what that really looks like. I know it's a short time period, but for the next 4 years, it certainly gives many of my clients just got a pay raise.
Good to know. Jeff, appreciate the breakdown. Appreciate you helping us to stay ahead of the curve as things shift. So we'll see you next time for more clarity on life's financial seasons.
Thank you very much, Skip. You have a great weekend, and God bless, man.
You too, man. Have a blessed weekend.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into the Four Seasons podcast, brought to you by B&H Wealth Strategies, where your financial success is our priority. Schedule your free 20-minute consultation today by calling 423-247-1152 or by visiting bhretire.com. Take the first step toward making your financial dreams come true. Until next time, remember, every season is the right season to plan for your future. Securities and registered investment advisory services offered through Silver Oak Securities, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. B&H Wealth Strategies and Silver Oak Securities, Inc. are not affiliated.